there's a sadness, I think, to see them hitting this kind of low early on in the season. And I think everyone's hoping that it turns around, but definitely a worrying spot.
Yeah, on that, is this the lowest? Like, I agree. I grabbed a coffee in Donnybrook this morning, and the chat was about Munster and how poor they are. Is this the lowest they've been? I know it's very early; it's 4 weeks in, but it's as low as it's as poor. Like, they always were capable of having bad days, but then the reaction would be pretty immediate. You know what I mean? And I thought, look at the win against Zebra, even though obviously they wouldn't have got the boost that you normally do by getting a bonus point in the second half so straight. And I just thought an Irish provincial match going to Connacht, was a great opportunity just to get there. And I agree with you, Murray. I think Graham is very kind to the players. Always says, that he can't fault the work ethic, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was easier for me by being up high and not watching on TV. But I don't see the urgency across the board. You know what I mean? And if they don't get that right, he's got big problems, because at the moment that's nearly a given every time you play in the URC, that you have to have a certain level of desire, work rate, and particularly some of the stuff off the ball is quite lethargic in my opinion.
And Rowntree, sorry, Gav.
Don't go for it, Mark.
He did look kind of haunted afterwards, and like, what a horrible position for him to be in. And you do hope that he gets to experience some of the highs of coaching, because he took a punt by going for the job. Munster took a punt on him. He's always been an assistant coach. He probably felt there's more potential in the squad, but maybe he's getting his eyes opened as to the reality of the situation. And the reality is, Munster, for example, last season nearly missed out on the URC playoffs. So this is kind of, as you say, Gav, and I've pointed to a few times, a continuation of it. And to be honest, again, hoping that it turns around for Munster, but this has been coming for a long time. A long, long time. This is years of poor management, bad decisions, contracting, recruitment, etc. And Rowntree is the one who's going to have to deal with that in hell. And as we've mentioned before, it'll probably take a bit more pain before it rights itself.
Yeah, it probably will. And look, we've seen across loads of sports, including in rugby, if you look at Ireland under Andy Farrell, sometimes things do just go right. And if you continue to, let's say, stick to the process, if you can pardon the sort of vomit-worthy phrasing, it can come good for Munster, absolutely. The thing is, Birch, I guess after a performance like that, and after really consecutive performances like those that they've put in at the start of this season, and even going back into last season, if you want to look at that, there's a growing sense that they actually, on paper, need a bit of a clear out, really. And you've questioned the talent in the squad overall on a recent episode of this podcast. I think fairly, and like I also thought it was pretty noteworthy that we didn't really get any negative feedback for that, whereas in the past it would have been like, oh, anti-Munster bias, or you're talking out your hole or whatever. It was actually, there was a general acceptance, at least from the listeners that I spoke with about it. I just don't know if they can actually say, if Rowntree wanted to shape this squad in his own image and wanted to remold it entirely and have that clear out, like, they probably don't have the resources to recruit enough players to replace any guys that you're getting rid of, if you know what I mean. Like, the turnover won't be as high at the end of this season as maybe Rowntree would like it to be, or it would be if you were in France. So, like, he is going to be stuck with a lot of these players. Like, is the reality that I see. I wonder, do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, look, that's the problem, because obviously you can't transform a squad in Ireland like you can in England or France with the NIQ rules, and obviously I don't think Munster want to be taking players from every other province to fix it either. It has to be built around homegrown talent. So I think the question is not bringing in people from outside. It's how can he fast track some of those young players that are there at the moment, and if they are going to miss out on Europe this year, well, they better have blooded some talent, you know what I mean, and that they can actually make sure that next year they're back in Europe. And look, it's very early days to say that, but I think it's a genuine concern, because you see the Lions have won 3 away games. Like, everyone thought the Lions were going to be the Zebra or the Dragons of this competition this year, because their best players got stolen, got poached by other clubs in South Africa. But now they've got a head start, and obviously playing in Joe Berg attitude with the confidence they'll have, they now are contenders to make Europe. So the Welsh, in fairness, and the Scots have been pretty patchy. So I'm not saying Munster can't make it, but they will need to start to gather some points quickly. You know, and obviously the Bulls at home this week is a must win, because then they go to Aviva. You know, and look, they probably can rise. They can probably raise their game to play Leinster, and it's very hard to see them beat them at home. But they can definitely be competitive, because they're better. They're better than they are. You know what I mean? Than they're playing at the moment. But for whatever reason, there's at the moment there's not one part of their game that's functioning. And Murray summed that up. And I do feel sorry for Graham, because I think obviously the players like them. You know, he's obviously a good man. He's a huge amount of experience, and he's probably doing a lot of stuff right. But maybe this is the end of this cycle of this group who have been underperforming for a long time. You know what I mean? And also maybe their confidence is a little bit shot, and self-belief. I don't know where the leadership group is and how that's managing it, but how it's managing the squad. But like over the last couple of years, I actually don't want to see Munster bad. I genuinely don't. I think a strong Munster is really important for Ireland. And over the last couple of years, when I've spoken honestly, or I remember Donald Lennon as well, and we become the targets of the fury, rather than actually understanding that there is issues in Munster, have been for a long time, and eventually it becomes a crisis. And I think they could, by round 6 of this, if they don't get another win, it will start to become a crisis. And for them not to make European Cup next year, that will affect their budget for the year after and the year after that, and that will affect their ability to recruit, retain, etc. Now, look, maybe they don't need to worry about that, but I do think, look, they've spent money very badly in the past, and eventually that comes home through.